Hey book pals, welcome back to my channel. I am here today to share something with you that I don't often do. Every month I tell you about a classic that I'm reading, but I rarely ever dive into what I consider the best classics. And if you know me outside of my social media outlets, you know that I am actually an English major and an English teacher by trade, and so classics are my jam. I don't talk about them often on social media because it's not usually what most people are into, but today I thought I would treat you to a few of my favorite classics and why I think you should read them. So I'm going to start with something simple, which is George Orwell's Animal Farm. I had put off reading this book for years and actually read it about 4 years ago when I was watching over my dad, who had been in a rehab center at the time after a surgery, and I read this while he napped. I put this away in one day. This is so surprisingly simple yet deep. Sorry if you can hear my dogs in the background. I strongly recommend that anybody living in the United States right now read this book. It's a satirical look at what happens when people want to be above others, when we take over things and trample on people's rights and freedoms. But it's told in a way that is completely outlandish and entertaining, but it is yet so deep. Like, it will leave you wondering what you just read and wondering how this could have been so long ago and yet still so absolutely relevant today. So highly recommend. It is a quick read, as I said, so don't not read this. Next up is one of my favorites to teach and read. I have read this book at least 20 times, and I think that it is one of the most misunderstood books out there right now, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I have read this book so many times with seniors in high school, and I have to tell you, everybody is expecting some like horrific monster tale, and really the monsters in this book are humans, and the actual creature in the book will make you think twice about everything you believe. As you can see, this is my copy from my teaching days. I leave all my notes in it. I have had like full-on arguments with my classes over whether or not we're team Frankenstein or team creature, and I have to tell you that with each read I switch. Like, sometimes I read it and the sentiment is absolutely team creature, and then other times I'm reading and I'm like, no, team Victor Frankenstein for this one. So if you think that this is some kind of monster tale, you are wrong. This is a tale about humanity and the lack thereof, and how far of a responsibility we have for the things that we create and put out in the world. So it's actually quite philosophical. I highly recommend this book. I'm so glad that I got to read it as many times as I have. Next one is A Tomb. So if you are not into sitting for long periods of time, then this one is not for you, but it is for me. Les Mis. Les Miserables is about the French Revolution. It does have, it kind of gives me the feels, if you ever watched or read, especially if you read Gone with the Wind, it's kind of like that, in the sense that like a big portion of the book is what is happening historically, but there is this tale of people and characters that is also huge. If you're not into historical facts and war and whatnot, then this won't be the book for you. But I have to tell you, Les Mis is one of the few books that make me cry like throughout. I spent the better part of the first time I read this book crying, and I actually just picked up this copy at a used bookstore over the summer, and I'm looking forward to reading it again. I've read Les Mis twice, and so this will be my third read. It is hard to commit to reading something this big over and over again, but it is a book that I always tell my students, if you have enjoyed reading classics and you are a reader, this is a good one to pick up. This is just the amount, Victor Hugo is one of my favorite authors. The amount of work he puts into developing characters is astounding. Highly recommend. If you're not going to read the book, at least watch one of the movies. It's just excellent. Next up was one I did not think I was going to like because I am not an American classics fan, but I decided one year to push myself out of my comfort zone and read John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. Yes, this is super sad. I read it as short as it is. I mean, it's what, 105 pages, this version? And it took me 3 days to read just because it's a little, like, historically, there's some things that we would consider inappropriate to say. There's some slurs in here, and so that was difficult to read at first. And then the second day I was reading it, I kind of got a hint of where it was going, and I didn't want to get there. The end has stuck with me for over 3 years. I cannot believe that it took me this long to read such a little book. I recommend it to everybody. It has made me a Steinbeck fan. I am currently working my way on my TBR towards East of Eden. This was just a phenomenal read. It will make you think about the characters for years. And I'm pretty sure I will read this again. So, highly recommend. Next up is a fan favorite among my students, which I did not think they would like, The Picture of Dorian Gray. This book is so much more than a horror. It is extremely philosophical. Again, I think oftentimes we pick up classics that are horrors and we're just astounded at how deep a book can go. This book had, I only read it with one class and one honors English 4 class, and I'm telling you, those kids loved this book. They were so into what was happening with the character. The main character puts all of himself into a painting that was made of him, and so he begins to do ugly things, realizing that this image that was painted of him is absorbing all the ugliness, and he is staying almost forever young and untainted. And it is what happens to him as he loses bits of himself to his vanity and to his vices. On the surface, yes, it is a horror tale where a painting is kind of absorbing your nastiness and you're becoming this horrible person. But deep into the book, you realize that it's a commentary on how much of ourselves we lose when we are not living as our best selves. And this was just phenomenal to read. My kids loved it. I keep in touch with several of the girls that have graduated from that class, and we will do like dinners and Barnes and Noble dates, and every time we walk by the classics, they're like, I love this book. So highly recommend. Speaking of horrors in the classic, I will give you one that is actually a true horror, Dracula. This book holds a special place in my heart because it is the first adult book I picked up in the library. I can't tell you how old I was. I can only tell you that it was before 3rd grade. And we walked into the library, and in our library back home, the kids section was upstairs. You'd go through these turnstiles and you'd go up the stairs for the children's section and downstairs for all the adult books. And I know it was before the end of 3rd grade, because that's when my parents split up. So my dad was still living at home. He had taken me to the library, and we went through the turnstile, and he turned around, crouched down, and said, today you can pick any book from down here. And it was like the heavens had opened up for me. And I picked Dracula. I sat out on our swing porch in our backyard, and our swing on the porch, porch swing, not swing porch, on the porch swing outside in our yard, and I read it over I don't know how many days, but I read it cover to cover, and I loved it. It was the first horror I had ever read that was not like an abridged version. Fast forward years later, probably 2007 or 8, I get my first Kindle. And I start downloading immediately all the free classics, right? And the first one I sit down to read is Dracula. And I thought, why did my parents let me read this? There are extremely sexual scenes. There are terrifying scenes in here. There are a lot of philosophical things that I would not have understood. And I asked my mom, I'm like, how did you let me read that book? And she says, your dad and I always figured that what you could absorb, you'd absorb, and what you couldn't, you'd gloss over. And so apparently I had. But it is a book that I remember turned me on to loving horror early on, and that trend continued for me for years to come. It is only in recent years that I'm finding that horror is no longer filling the bucket for me, probably because it's not done to this level. This is an amazing book. It is not the first vampire book in literature, but it is one of the most well known, and it is beautiful, and it is written with epistles throughout. It's just such a literary work of art, and it is scary. So if you are looking for an actual horror that will also check the classics box for you, this is it. I highly recommend this one. Next is a surprise read. I actually read Mary Elizabeth Braddon's Lady Audley's Secret. I read it as an Audible, and I had downloaded it because it was free and I was going on a trip and I needed something to like occupy my time, and it sounded like a little bit of a mystery, and I started listening, and I have to tell you, I had no idea it was a classic. I had no idea that it was that old of a book. This book lives rent-free in my mind, and I recommend it as often as I can. If you are not into classics, but you are into thrillers, this is the book for you. This is about a woman who has a secret, and she goes above and beyond to keep her secret, but somebody is on her tail. There are twists throughout. There is lying and intrigue and women trying to get out of the situation that they're in, and friendship, grief, loss. This book was phenomenal. I absolutely loved it, and I am committed to reading like her backlist of novels because it's just, she's that good. So highly recommend if you are into thrillers but also want to read a classic. This is it. I'm down to my top 3 favorite classics of all time, and unfortunately for 2 of them, I don't own them. So first one I want to talk about is The Count of Monte Cristo. I have had many versions of The Count of Monte Cristo. I have read that book 17 times. It is as big as Les Mis. It is a huge book, but it is the quintessential tale of revenge, but not just like getting revenge, but also what happens to a person when that's what they dedicate their life to. It is another Victor Hugo book, and it is phenomenal. I'm sorry, that's Alexander Dumas. I'm looking at another Victor Hugo I'm about to give you. Alexander Dumas does a wonderful job of just keeping you in this story that you feel is never going to end. Like, you are literally following this man throughout his life. And it ends in kind of like every few chapters is a cliffhanger, and that's because it was originally published as inserts in a magazine, and so it would leave on a cliffhanger so that you can pick it up you'd want to pick up the next issue and read the next installment of The Count of Monte Cristo. And it's just so well written. You will fall in love with these characters. You will love them. You will hate them. You will wonder why this is happening. But Dumas does an amazing job of just keeping you hooked the entire way. This is a book also that holds a lot of sentiment for me. It was one of my father's favorite books. He and I read it together several times throughout my adult life. And it was actually the book that we were discussing the most when he passed. And so I was reading it when he passed, and it took me over 3 months to finish that final read that I did of it. I have not picked it up since. It's been almost 3 years. It just holds a lot of emotion for me, and I get a little melancholy when I read it now, but it's still chef's kiss. Read that book. Next up that I do not have a copy of is Wuthering Heights. I don't have that copy because I've lent it to somebody. And by the way, I don't have The Count of Monte Cristo because I sold them all back and actually ordered myself a special edition copy of the unabridged version. And so I will make a video of that when I get it. But up next is Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights is a book that many people think is going to be this boring Victorian slog of a book, and it is not. It is actually one of the first literary pieces about domestic violence, not between husband and wife necessarily, but even involving children and what that does to a person long term. And I would dare say it's one of the first books or oldest books that I've ever read about trauma bonding and how that is a real thing. You know, obviously it's not referred to as trauma bonding throughout the book, but it is definitely an example of how trauma bonds people, sometimes in a healthy way so that they can heal, and sometimes in the most unhealthy ways possible. And this is such a tale. What else can I tell you about it? It is a little bit dry to start. If you have a hard time with classics, I suggest you listen to it on Audible if audio is your thing. Highly recommend. That is a book that I will read again. I've only read it once, but it is one that I will pick up again. And finally, a book that I did not think I was going to like, another Victor Hugo for my list, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. During COVID, I subscribed to a million subscription boxes of all sorts, but this one was my favorite. This came from Coffee and a Classic, and it was like a bookish box based, and all the things in it, including the coffee, was like reminiscent of the book you were given that month. So they give you all these really beautiful bound copies of books, and this was one of the first ones that I got. And I sat down to read it, and I thought, oh, it's going to be like the Disney movie. No, ma'am, it was not. This book had me like ugly sobbing for at least the final quarter of the book. This is nothing like the Disney movie. I think Disney made a great adaptation for children, but this book, Esmeralda everybody is trying to rape her or sleep with her throughout the book, and I do say they're trying to force themselves upon her. She is also disparaged by people in the neighborhood who end up having to eat crow at the end. But she's also not very nice to Quasimodo, like you see in the movie. No, this book is also surprisingly hilarious. There are characters in here that made me like laugh out loud. The ending, the last lines of this book are etched in my soul. If I open up to the back of the book right now and read the last lines, I will start crying again. It is just such a tale of love in a way that you would not expect. So if you want a love story where it is an unrequited love, but a very pure love, this is the perfect book. I love this book so much. So those are my picks for classics that I feel you should read. Now, there are a lot of classics that when people mention them, I'm like, don't read it, it's terrible. But we all have our own opinions. So these are my favorites. Please let me know if you have any classics that are your favorites. I still read at least one classic a month. This month I read Albert Camus' The Stranger, which I have been putting off for a long time. It was a great read. Not my favorite kind of classic, but still, it got 2 thumbs up for me. So I still have a lot of classics left to read, and I am excited to see what you all would recommend. And if you've read any of these and feel the same or feel differently about them, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos. Coming up soon, I have my weekly what I'm reading, but I also have my August haul coming up. I think I'm waiting on 2 more books that I ordered, and then I am closing my wallet for the month, like no more. So stay tuned for that, and again, let me know what you're reading. Bye.